Hello, my name is Dr. Paloma Viejo, and I'm here today to talk about this paper, which we have titled as Understanding Cyberbullying and Security and Online Safety Issue. I just hope the title is not misleading, because what mostly I aim with this presentation today is to explore the rationale that social media have to place bullying as a matter of safety and security. So for the majority of you who are interested on bullying in online safety, in bullying in online environments, you have probably observed that on their majority, social media platforms haven't placed their bullying policies under the security section. So we have here the case of Snapchat, whose community guidelines are in place or nested in the Snapchat Safety Center. We have the case of TikTok, who relates harassment and bullying with platform security. Facebook, that employs bullying and harassment under the section of safety. For Twitter, abuse is nested on safety and security, and YouTube is quite explicit as well, is fostering child's safety. So again, the aim of what I aim to explore after this observation is the rationale that social media have to place bullying policies under the matter of security. And I want to explore what is the significance of the phenomenon that occurs after social media repeat that bullying is a problem of security. The following presentation emerges from is the intersection between two studies, is bullying studies, which we are all familiar with, and platform governance. For those who are not familiar with platform governance, I can briefly point out there is a new field of research that seeks to understand the political and social effects of digital platforms. That is, in social governance, we are not looking into how users behave in the platform. We rather look how social media platforms mediate users' behavior. Now, to embrace platform governance involves delving into what constitutes governance. And researching governance is, according to Foucault and Miller and Rose, the study of all techniques that intervene in the life of individuals and the knowledge that underpins those schemes of intervention. What it means by knowledge that underpins those schemes of intervention is what we are trying to understand by governance is to what principles, to what ideas the techniques of intervention respond to what rationale. And in this case, we are going to argue that the rationale that social media uses to intervene in content, in bullying content, is that of security or safety. So in relation to the techniques that social media employ to govern bullying content, Tijana Milosevic argues that social media governing activity and techniques revolve around blocking and muting content. On her book, the author argues that whereas this could be potentially a good start, the measure is not sufficient, even counterproductive. And I quote, "More often than not, governed bullying requires more layered solutions than merely content takedowns. Whereas repeated abuse of an individual could require content takedown, solving a relational problem requires more complex solutions." In taking all this into consideration, what this paper argued is that if social media block, mutes, and delete content, is because the measures that social media put in place to deal with bullying content are concerned specifically with the limitation of the free circulation of harmful content than in directly tackling or dealing with social relational problems. That is, social media apply their own rationale, that is, to what bullying is, and the rationale is related with circulation of content. So does it mean that social media is not concerned about bullying? No. Social media, it is concerned about bullying, and they found programs, and they are people behind the programs, and of course, they take the responsibility. What this rather means is that within the platform, social media have its own limitations to deal with bullying. Limitations that are defined by their settings and mostly by their design. Because fundamentally, social media were designed to allow free flow of information. Now, what exactly constitutes free flow of information? It means that users are allowed to upload all forms of content and express their opinions and voices without being previously edited. They are not pre-edited. It means that voices and opinion became immediately digital content that travels fast, that travels far, and that encounters its target faster. It means also that users can receive information freely. That's it. Social media platforms are designed to be theoretically or in intention neutral places to send and receive information. Now, when harmful content started to navigate in the platforms, and that began to be a problem for social media platforms, the idea of neutrality changed. And instead of being neutral platforms, they started to introduce security and safety measures. Now, the question is, how media platforms do not compromise the notion of freedom of speech and freedom of information, while at the same time provide security measures? That's it. To what extent those security measures are coercions for the free flow of information? Well, this tension between freedom of security was treated by Michel Foucault in Security, Territory, and Population 30 years before social media were on the platforms. Sorry, 30 years before social media were around. And basically, what Foucault is saying is that in liberalism, the way to balance freedom and security is by creating apparatus of security that allows people and goods to circulate freely, but under control. So what control then do we refer when we talk about controlling bullying content on social media? This is what is called moderation. Moderation is the series of techniques by which users and social media platforms review content and decide to what extent that content should be visible for them or in the platform. And all moderation techniques are in place under security rationale. In the moderation activity, there are three actors: the users, the human reviewers, and automatic detention. And all of them have a series of tasks or possibilities that are limited to regulate the visibility of content. In any social media, you can block somebody to limit the content, to limit what you see from that person or that user. Artificial intelligence regulates, there is something called borderline content, which basically means that when content starts to escalate and became problematic, you have an algorithm that reduces the visibility. That content might have not crossed the platform, might have not crossed might have not breached the community standards of each platform, but the algorithm starts thinking this is very close, so let's reduce visibility. At the same time, human reviewers have the possibility as well to limit the circulation of one particular message. They also have the power to delete it, or they also have the power to let it flow. So as you can say, all the techniques that intervene in how bullying content performs in the platform are more related with how that content flows, how we limit or shrink its visibility, than with the message or the meaning that the piece of content is carrying. Moderation does not mean that content is pre-censored or pre-edited. It simply decides what content should be doing in the platform. Therefore, in looking closer to this activity of moderating content under this security rationale, what we uncover is that the technical relationship of social media with harmful content is not that of worrisome or concern for what constitutes bullying at a behavioral and relational level, but instead as a matter of physical content that, when freely circulating across the platform, might cause harm. Therefore, the rationale that social media are applying to intervene on how such harmful content circulates is by reducing its visibility, which is by many other techniques involving deleting, blocking, muting, and removing. The rationale, therefore, to block or delete or remove does not respond to bullying, but to content and how content circulates on a platform. So what we are basically saying is that social media platforms, as we know them nowadays, on their current design, cannot be concerned. Perhaps cannot be concerned is not the right word. The way they are designed do not allow social media to tackle bullying as a social relational issue. So what we are fundamentally observing here? I think that what we are mostly observing here is a displacing of meaning from bullying as behavior embedded in a social relational issue to a matter of security. But I hope I have explained why social media use the rationale of security. And what I'm trying to make here is a distinction, whereas social media needs to use the rationale of security, we should not be taking over necessarily to the entire field of bullying. Does it mean that social media are determined forever to not be able to deal with bullying as a social relational problem? I actually don't think so. And I think that Milosevic is tackling something interesting. And one example that she's working at the moment that I would love to keep looking at is developing artificial intelligence-based proactive moderation with children's feedback that facilitates the resolution of online conflicts. That might be a path to go forward. This includes, for example, prompting bystanders intervention and eliciting empathetic responses that will facilitate more constructive peer relations in offline context too. So basically what Tijana Milosevic is saying is that we don't have to be determined by how social media design their tools. We can actually make an input on how those tools are designed and start to inform artificial intelligence and the other techniques with more empathetic inputs from those who have been victimized by bullying. Thank you very much for having me here today. I do understand it is not a quite straightforward paper, and there are issues here that I'm still trying to resolve myself. So I will appreciate any form of feedback that you want to provide. And if anybody is interested on the full presentation, because I have to keep it limited, I will appreciate an email and I will be happy to start a conversation with you. Have a really, really good afternoon.
First of all, thanks to the World Anti-Bullying Forum for the space and the opportunity to present this work. And the same goes to all the presence here. Thank you for your time and your attention. I am Omar Castro-Sataray, a PhD student at the University of Guadalajara in Mexico, and what is going to be displayed is a fraction of a bigger project. The work is titled Predictors of Cyberaggression and Ecological Theory. Let's begin. The objective of this research is to determine the relationship of the individual, family, school, community, and cyber community variables that best explain cyberaggression behaviors in adolescents from an ecological perspective. To do so, the theoretical basis was the ecological theory of human development, proposed by the psychologist Yuri Bronfenbrenner. The work was done following the principle that if the human is the base of the study, it is necessary to add as many aspects as might be possible to analyze, but that are part of the development context of the human in question. The human is a social being, and that makes it a complex object of study. And more talking about adolescence, which is full of changes, and in a modernity that expects us to adapt at any second, the complexity increases. Now the internet is putting us under a shower of stimulus and incentives. Manuel Castells, the Spanish sociologist, analyzed the transition from the physical world to the virtual one as a new opportunity, calling this the network society. This society allows us to share information as a way of empowerment to break power cords, but at the same time, it generated new ones, moving the old-fashioned violence behavior to exert power to the new cyber structure. The ecological theory, in the ecological theory, there are four systems cataloged by the level of interaction with the human. First, we have the microsystem. It relates the individuals directly to other subsystems, as it could be family, school, community, and the cyber community. Then we have the mesosystem. The mesosystem is focused on the interaction between the subsystems, as we see here, family with community or with school, and other kind of variables. Then we have the exosystem. This one is compounded by the subsystems that are not involved directly with our individual, as we see here, parents' work, brother classmates, and others. Then, in the external part, we have the macro system. This one is conformed by all the beliefs and ideologies that surrounds our context. In this case, for this study, we will be centered on the micro system. But why working with adolescents? The UN declared that if we focus our work with adolescents and youth as a prevention for future problems, and we promote an active participation with them, it will equal to the promotion of economic and social development, as simply as says that they are the future. The method that we use. Okay, the universe was compounded by 4,958 middle school students from Bahía de Banderas, Nayarit, Mexico, from private school and public schools. The sample was compounded by 2,033 middle school students based on Fisher, Arkin, and Colton tables. The statistical package used was SPSS in its 25 version. And for the analysis, first we used the MANOVA. We applied it conglomerating low, moderate, and high cyberaggression perpetration. And finally, a multiple linear regression was made to analyze the predictive weight of the variables and systems. Then, related to the variables, let me take me out of the equation. Related to the variables and its respective scales, I will name which variables correspond to each system analyzed, but not the scales to save some time. In the individual system, we analyze the satisfaction with life, the psychological distress, and suicidal ideation. For the family functioning, open communication, and the offensive communication. For school climate, we use the school climate, the school aggression, and then for the community, that is the most extensive, we use the community integration, the social support in informal systems, the community participation, the positive attitude towards the institutional authority, and the positive attitude towards the transgression of social norms. Then, the last was the analysis of the cyber community. In this case, we use the positive use of social media, the problematic internet use, and the cyber aggression. As you see, every scale presents a good validity in function of the number of items used. Let me activate my camera again. Beginning with the results, in the case of the MANOVAs, first, in the individual level, all the variables showed significant differences in relation to the level of cyber aggression. The more cyber aggression, the less satisfaction with life. And the more cyber aggression, the more increase of the psychological distress and suicidal ideation increasing. Then, in the family level, as we see here, family functioning and offensive communication have shown significant differences in reference to the level of cyber aggression, being reduced or augmenting respectively. The exception was the open communication. It differs the level of low cyber aggression and moderate is different, but there's no significant difference between the moderate and high cyber aggression levels. Then, within the school, only the school aggression has shown significant differences, augmenting in reference to the level of cyber aggression, while the school climate hasn't shown any significant difference. Then, at the community level, the only variable that shows significant difference was the positive attitude towards the transgression of social norms. Then, tending to increase as the level of cyber aggression increases. In the case of the community participation, it hasn't shown any difference at all, while the rest of the variable only shown significant difference in relation to the high and moderate cyber aggression groups. Then we have the cyber community. In this case, talking about the cyber community, both variables, the positive use of social media and the problematic internet use, have shown significant differences, increasing as the level of cyber aggression involvement increased. Then we have the results. Let me take me out to see the table. As we see here, the set of variables in the individual system showed a predictive value of 7%, being the psychological distress and the suicidal ideation the significant variables. In this case, the psychological distress is the one with more weight, and in the case of satisfaction with life, this one hasn't been significant. Then we have the family level. Pretty interesting. The family level has a predictive value of 9%, being the offensive and the open communication the significant variables related, leaving the family functioning as a not significant in this case. Well, and again, being the offensive communication the one with more weight. Then the school, in the system with the school, was the more weight in this case, with 24% as a predictive value, thanks to the variable of the school aggression being the only significant variable, contrary to the school climate that hasn't shown any significant relation, but also in the case of school aggression being the one with more weight. Passing to the community system, it has a 7% of predictive value. Only the variables related to the following of social norms result significant. In this case, being the attitude towards the institutional authority and the positive attitude towards transgression of social norms, the only one significant, being the transgression, the one with more weight, leaving the community integration, the social support, and the community participation as a non-predictive variables. Then, in the cyber community was the most influential system in this case, with a predictive value, the second most, is the influential system, with a predictive value of 21%, and the problematic internet and the positive use of social media were significant. Passing to the conclusions, let me see, for my time, the low predictive capability of the systems could be a reference of the non-linear relation of the cyberaggression problem, opening the opportunity to analyze the different systems as a different paths related to the problematic. One example is what I'm putting right here. Maybe if there's an aggression in family, this is causing a reproductive path generating aggressive aggressions in the school. And then this is being translated in transgression in internet. Why? Following a different path but in different kind of environments. Being born here and being translated here. Then, also the results have shown that the aggressors could be using aggression in networks to canalize the problems that concern them. For example, with the anxiety, and depressive symptoms being related to the psychological distress. What could be seen here is that this follows the idea that most of the violence behaviors are an instrument. As an instrument, it's helping the adolescents do something. In this case, mitigate the effects that the psychological problems is causing in them, but also in a context where the aggression is a common part of the interaction, it could be also used to feel that it's part of the social structure, helping them to forge a social identity. Furthermore, the results have shown that if we want to prevent and act against the cyberbullying problematic, it is important to take some back steps. First, structure the variables by modeling. In this case, relating the aggression as a part of a structural violence, it starts within the family, and it could be transferred to the school and now be present on the internet. The problem is that if we see the violence as an instrument to satisfy some necessities, in this case, identity or others, instead of disappearing, they could just change the way it manifests, and the problem will increase in how as the adolescent follows it. How happens this? Now, as adolescent, it happens something in the internet, it's aggressive, but what will happen if he has a high rank when he grows up? What will happen then? Second, compare different contexts, rural, urban, or metropolitan. See how different the structures are and how do they work. Third, inclusion of the member perspectives. In this case, we could add family, professors, or other community members. Sometimes the adolescent makes things that, thanks to the internet opacity, the others don't really know what is he doing. Fourth, link the public publicity to the more related variables. Show, in this case, the structure and try to follow that in the public publicity. Now, let's use this study as an example. The results have shown that the more school aggression, the more cyber aggression. So we can act against the school aggression. But what will happen if we try to use our teacher as an ambassador against the aggression? It won't work in this case. Why? Easy. In this case of a study, the school climate values are part of the teacher's roles. So, in this case, teachers can be an influence, but not as much as we need. Being better working along the families and the internet networks directly than with the schools, because in this case, the positive school isn't working against the cyber aggression. It's not predictive, so if we try to act there, maybe it won't work. So it's time to adapt better to better algorithms and find the best working parts. Again, thanks all for your time. Thank you. And I'm open to any suggestions, collaboration to improve the research practice. Thanks all of you again.